All right, Shavosai, good morning. Let us begin by thanking all of our sponsors for this morning. To thank our TALMUD TORAH sponsors for the month of Tishrei, Jerry and Sora Wolasky for dedicating Overshum and Drushos this month. And the zechus of refuah sheleimah for Zecharya Dov and Perel Shira, Shaindy and Avraham Kelman, in memory of their beloved parents, and in the zechus of all those who need a refuah sheleimah. Dr. Linda Weinberg, in loving memory of her husband, Dr. Paul Weinberg, Paris, Moshe ben Avraham David, Selma Woolf, with immense gratitude to Hashem, and with Teffilos for health for all in the new year, and Leah Sol is a zechus for refuah sheleimah for her daughter Ilana, Bas Esther, and for all those in need of yeshuos. But also with that, let us begin. Today's daf is Lamites. We actually have a very, very beautiful daf ahead of us today. Some actually magnificent agarata waiting for us today as well. A lot of Baruch Hashem exciting today and tomorrow, Meretz Hashem. A lot of exciting things happening over the next little bit. Let's begin. So we are picking up in Meretz Hashem on Lamed Chesem Beis, 38b, sorry. And we left off so let's pick up 2, 4, 6, 8, 9 lines up in the bottom. So if remember again, the Gemara made a statement. The Gemara actually quoted a Mishnah. The Mishnah said, Chadash is Asr min Da'araisa, both in Chutz La'aretz, or both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. Arla is a halacha, and Kilayim are midrabanan and divrei sofrim. We then had a machlokes as to what does it mean when we say that Arla is a halacha. Rabbi Yehuda said in the name of Shmuel that halacha means hilchos medina, that it's a practice that's observed. Which sounds like it becomes even like a drabanan or less than a drabanan, and ultimately Ula said in Rabbi Yochanan that it's a halacha Moshe Misinai. Okay, so machlokes as to the nature of Arla and Chutzar. So Chadash, everyone is going to agree midaraisa. Kilayim, everyone is going to agree is midrabanan. Machlokes about Arla. Says the Gemara, Amalei Ula Rabbi Yehuda. So Ula said to Rabbi Yehuda, Ula who holds that it's halacha l'maisa, said to Rabbi Yehuda, Bishlama l'didi da'amina halacha l'moshe misinai. So Ula said to Rabbi Yehuda, according to me, Ula, that Arla in Chutz La'aretz is a halacha l'moshe misinai, that it applies. Hainu d'shanilan bein safek Arla l'safek kilayim. It makes sense that the halacha distinguishes between a case of safek Arla and a case of safek kilayim. Where do we see this distinction? It's quite fascinating. This nan safek Arla. So what happens if you have a situation of safek Arla? What's safek Arla? You have fruit on a tree. You don't know how old the tree is, right? Is it in 3 years? After 3 years? So safek Arla, ba'aretz aser. So in Eretz Yisrael, a safek Arla is going to be aser. Makes sense. Safek da'araisa l'chumra. B'Surya mutter. I will say Surya, remember again, are areas conquered by David HaMelech and next to Eretz Yisrael, but do not have Kedushas Eretz Yisrael. So essentially, they're like Chutz La'aretz. So B'Surya mutter, in Surya it's mutter, or Safek Arla is mutter. B'Chutz La'aretz, if you come into a case of Safek Arla and Chutz La'aretz, what do? Yored v'lokeach. Rabbi is actually very interesting. Yored v'lokeach, Rashi says over here, Yisrael v'lokeach min alvei kochav maloke. A Yisrael could go down to the field. He could purchase from an akum who is selling stuff that may have come from an Arla field. So what we're saying over here is, in Chutz La'aretz, you could actually go down and actively purchase produce that is Safek Arla. Now obviously again, if you know for sure that it's Arla, that of course is not advisable, and you can't go and pick the Arla yourself, but if an akum is selling produce, and you know that it came from a field that had Arla, as long as you don't know for sure that what he's selling is Arla, you're allowed to go ahead and purchase it. Okay. You could go down to the field, purchase it from the akum, as long as you don't see him actually picking Arla fruits and selling it to you. Zebra say that's Safek Arla. That's Safek Arla. Ve'ilu gabi kilayim. Yeah, when it comes to Safek kilayim, what's the halacha? Tanan Hasam we learned. Hanotea yarek v'yarek. Both if a person goes ahead and plants 2 types of vegetables together, that's kilayim. Hanotea yarek v'yarek. Nimka, so the Gemara says. I'm sorry, it's not yarek nimkar chutzala. And I will say, so what happens? So now you have a field. Look at Rashi for just a moment. Kerem hanatua. I'm sorry, I read that wrong. Kerem hanatua yerek. Right. So look at Rashi. Kerem hanatua yerek shezara yerek bein agifarim tavel klai kerem. Klai kerem. So you have someone who has a vineyard and they plant some type of vegetable within that vineyard. That's klai kerem, right? That ultimately is forbidden mixtures in the vineyard. Okay, it says so. Kerem hanatua yerek or yerek nimkar chutzala. Rashi says, so here's the case. Someone has a vineyard in which they planted vegetables. They're now going ahead and selling vegetables outside of that vineyard. There is a strong possibility that the vegetables that they are selling are kilai hakarem. So what's the halacha? So the Gemara says, Ba'aretz aser. So in Eretz Yisrael it's going to be aser. So in Eretz Yisrael, safek klaim will be aser. B'Surya mutar. Surya is mutar. B'chutz la'aretz yored v'lokate. O bilvat shlo yilkot biyad. In chutz la'aretz, what can you do? Rashi says over here, in chutz la'aretz, the akum could go and actively collect vegetables from this vineyard and sell it to a Jew, as long as the Jew himself is not actually harvesting the vegetables. Right? So we'll say, so by Arla, the halacha is, you could purchase from the akum as long as you don't know for sure that it's Arla. In Kilayim, it sounds like, even if you know for sure that it's Kilayim, as long as you're not the one who's picking it, you could purchase it from the akum. Okay, so we'll say, so what's the problem? So let's take a step back for just a moment. So this is Ula says like this. According to me, Kilayim in Chutz La'aretz is Drabanan, and Arla is Halacha L'Moshe Misinai. So according to me, Ula says it makes sense why the Mishnah makes a distinction between Safek Arla and Chutz La'aretz and Safek Kilayim in Chutz La'aretz. But according to you, Rabbi Yehuda, Arla and Kilayim should have the same halacha because both are Asr Midrabana. Safek of both is Asr Midrabana and Chutz La'aretz. Yet why does the Mishnah distinguish between the two? To which the Gemara says, fine. Ela l'didach. So this is Ula speaking to Rabbi Yehuda. It's top of Lamites. Nisni ozev v'zeh yori v'lokeach. Ozev v'zeh yori v'lokeach. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the halacha should be the same for Safek Arla and Safek Kilayim in Chutz La'aretz. Let the Mishnah say by both of them, either by both of them, you could go down and the akum could sell it to you as long as you don't see exactly what he's picking, or let the halacha be the same for both of them, that you could even see the akum picking as long as you don't pick it yourself. To which the Gemara says, Nisni ozev v'zeh yoreh v'lokeach, ozev v'zeh yoreh v'lokeit, harmalei Shmuel Ravanan. So in fact, Shmuel did say to Ravanan, Tani, ozev v'zeh yoreh v'lokeach, ozev v'zeh yoreh v'lokeit. So we'll say, Inachinami, Shmuel did say to Ravanan, you're right. Halacha l'maisa, the halacha should be the same ultimately again for Safek Arla and Safek Kilayim and Chutz La'aretz. Therefore, again, amend the Mishnah accordingly. Okay, incredible. So we'll say, so again, we're still left with our fundamental machlokes. So here's what everybody agrees with. Chadash, in both Eretz Yisrael, Chutz La'aretz, Asr Midaraisa. Okay? Kilayim, in Eretz Yisrael, Asr Midaraisa, Chutz La'aretz, Midrabanan. Arla is going to be our machlokes case. We have Rabbi Yehuda saying it's a Drabanan, and Ula telling us that ultimately, again, it is a halacha l'Moshe Misinai. Good. And I will say, obviously, again, the machlokes and Arla, as you saw right over here, is going to impact how we hold in a case of Safek Arla in Chutz La'aretz. Fine. So Marbreid Ravna Masnila Lekula. Marbreid Ravna ultimately listed this halacha lekula in a lenient way. What does he say? Zeh v'zeh yored v'lokate u'bilvat shlo yilkot biyad. In both of these cases, he held that both in Safek Arla and Safek Kilayim in Chutz La'aretz, a Jew could go down to the field, have the akum harvest whatever he wants from that field, as long as the Jew himself is not harvesting, it will be mutter. Incredible. So Amalei Levi l'Shmuel. Levi said to Shmuel, Arioch. I will say Arioch was a nickname that Shmuel had, that Levi gave him. Arioch. It's a complimentary nickname. So the Gemara says, Arioch, Safek li va'ana'echol. Or I should say, Safek li va'ana'echol, which literally means create a Safek situation for me and I will eat the produce. Look at Rashi, it's actually fascinating. Safekli, second line from the top, Rashi, Safekli, lokot shelo bifanai, sheyeh safek etzli, va'ana eichol o ba'ar lakai. So let's listen to this. So Levi said to Shmuel, do me a favor, actively create a safek arla situation for me. Create a safek arla. I must say, now how do you create a safek arla situation for someone? You pick fruit, right? And they don't know where it came from, right? You pick fruits from a field in which there was an arla tree. You don't know which tree it came from. So Levi is saying to Shmuel, create for me, this is in Chutz La'aretz, create for me a safek arla situation so that I can eat the fruits from the field. So we'll say, there's two incredible things over here that's happening. Number one is that a Jew is creating a safek arla situation. And number two, another Jew is able to eat from that safek arla situation. And number three, that they are purposely causing a safek arla situation. Now obviously, this goes in line with the opinion that says that safek arla is not the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. So Rav Avya v'Rav Barav Chanan mesafku sapki lahadadi. Rav Avya and Rav Barav Chanan would create safek arla situations for one another so that they would be able to go ahead and eat the produce. So we'll say, so remember, this is now a third opinion. Because beforehand we saw Ula saying it's halacha l'Moshe Sinai, Rabbi Yehuda saying it's asher midirabanan. Now there's a third school of thought. What does the third school of thought say? Mutter. Right, that safek arla in Chutz La'aretz is mutter. And not only that, but you could actually proactively create the safek arla situation yourself. Incredible. So it says Gavaiter, Charife de Pompadisa, Amri Charife de Pompadisa, the sharp ones of Pompadisa, said the following, Ein arla b'Chutz La'aretz. There is no din at all of arla in Chutz La'aretz. So now another school of thought. Arla simply doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz. Shalcha Rav Yehuda l'kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Shalach lei. Shalcha Rav Yehuda l'kamed Rabbi Yochanan. Shalach lei. Sasum sveka va'avad vada'a v'hachaz al perosein shetu'unin gniza. So as I look at Rashi over here, how to interpret this phrase. Sasum sveka va'avad vada'a kilomar sveka motor vada'a aser v'heter sveka satinu lahoros betzina. So it says, listen to this. Rabbi Yehuda sent before Rabbi Yochanan. He disagreed. He said like this: the halacha is safek arla is mutter in Chutz La'aretz, vadai arla is aser. But even the idea that safek arla is mutter in Chutz La'aretz, don't teach it publicly. Don't teach the halacha publicly. Rashi says, "V'lo lidrashu berabim hol makilin ba ki agavnar min nadarim." Because what's the problem? The problem is if you teach the heter that arla is mutter in Chutz La'aretz, or that safek arla is mutter in Chutz La'aretz, what's going to happen? What's going to happen is what you saw just above. People are going to exploit it. So really, again, so you have Rabbi Yehuda saying to before Rabbi Yochanan, really the halacha is safek arla in Chutz La'aretz is mutter, vadai arla is aser, but don't teach publicly that safek arla is mutter. And furthermore, again, v'hachreis al piroseim shetu'unin gniza, and ultimately, again, announce about their produce that it really should know about the produce of people who are mekel on arla and Chutz La'aretz. Their produce should not be consumed. A penalty. So three things he's saying over here. Number one, the halacha is safek arla in Chutz La'aretz is mutter. Vadai arla in Chutz La'aretz is aser. Don't teach that safek arla in Chutz La'aretz is mutter in public, because people may come to exploit it. And those who are mekel on arla in Chutz La'aretz don't consume their produce. Okay, incredible. The Chala Omer ein arla b'Chutz La'aretz, and anyone who says that the halacha of arla doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz, lo yehei lo nin v'nechad mashlich cheva b'gar b'kal Hashem. Wow. And we'll say whoever is mekel on arla and Chutz La'aretz should not have offspring who have a portion in the assembly of Klal Yisrael. So we'll say a pretty intense statement over here. Ve'inu k'man savrua. Here's the problem. We'll say the Gemara just quoted before the Charife de Pompadisa, right? The sharp ones of Pompadisa, Talmud Chacham Pompadisa said there's no arla and Chutz La'aretz. So what's going on over here? So Rabbi Yehuda is coming down hard, right? And Rabbi Yehuda is saying there is arla and Chutz La'aretz. There's safek arla and Chutz La'aretz is mutter. Don't teach that halacha in public because people are going to exploit it. Don't eat the produce of anyone who's mekel in Arla and Chutz La'aretz. And anyone who's mekel in Arla and Chutz La'aretz is not going to have offspring who are part of the assembly of God. Okay, pretty strong. So also here's the problem. They were great Torah scholars, yet they said Arla doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz. So what's their svara? So ve'inu kiman savrua ki had desanya Rabbi Elazar Rabbi Yossi Omer Mishum Rabbi Yossi Dormaska Shar Mishum Rabbi Yossi Elida Shar Mishum Rabbi Yochanan Ben Nuri Shar Mishum Rabbi Elazar Agadol Ein Arla b'Chutz La'aretz. All right, so we'll say, so they're relying on a number of other Torah scholars. In other words, there are different schools of thought here. That's what this comes down to. In other words, there is just a fundamental machlokes about the nature of Arla and Chutz La'aretz. So the Gemara says, really, is that true? Could anyone actually say that there's no Arla and Chutz La'aretz? But we learned, Rabbi Eliezer Omer Afa Chadash. Rabbi said, remember, where did all this get started? All of this got started in our Mishnah. And what did the Mishnah say? Rabbi Eliezer said, even Chadash. We'll say, Tanakama said that Arla and Kilayim apply in Chutz La'aretz. And Rabbi Eliezer said, Afa Chadash. We'll say, that sounds like everyone agrees. Afa Chadash means even Chadash, which sounds like everyone agrees that Arla applies in Chutz La'aretz. Rabbi Eliezer is just increasing the list. To which the Gemara says, Tani Chadash. No, in fact, this is incredible. In fact, I will say the halacha is that Rabbi Eliezer was arguing, and Rabbi Eliezer felt that Arla does not apply in Chutz La'aretz. The Rabbi Eliezer was saying the only thing that applies in Chutz La'aretz is Chadash, not Arla, and not Kilayim. So I will say, so now there is a school of thought out there that says that Arla simply doesn't apply in Chutz La'aretz at all. Am Rabbi Yasi, Am Rabbi Yochanan. Arla b'chutz la'aretz halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. But I will say, so Rabbi Yasi is of the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan, which we saw before. This is the same Rabbi Ula also Rabbi Yochanan before. That no, Arla in chutz la'aretz is aser, and it is a halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai. Amar Rabbi Zecharya Rabbi Yasi Batanya Safek Arla ba'aretz aser b'Surya mutar b'chutz la'aretz yori v'locate. But here's the problem. I will say, if you say that Arla and Chutz La'aretz is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, but say something is halacha l'Moshe Sinai, then what does that make it? A daraisa. If you have a suffix in a daraisa, what's the halacha? L'chumra. So if that's the case, why is suffix Arla and Chutz La'aretz mutar? I will say, it's not just mutar, but remember, what did we learn? What could you do with suffix Arla and Chutz La'aretz? You could actively buy produce from a field that is Safek Arla. In other words, you can actively buy Safek Arla as long as you did not see the Akum actually pick the Arla fruit. But if indeed it is a halacha l'Moshe b'Sinai, then how is it mutar? Ishtomim kishachad. See, he wasn't sure. He was confused for a little bit of time about this. Amrle ema kach ne'amar. This is what I mean to say. Sveika mutar vada aser. Rabbi says this is actually very interesting. Maybe halacha l'maisa, that is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. In other words, both say the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says Arla is aser in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz, and Safek Arla in Eretz Yisrael is aser, and in Chutz La'aretz effectively is mutar. In other words, we'll say that is the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. That's what the halacha l'Moshe Sinai itself dictates. Sveika mutar vada aser. If one goes ahead and plants or consumes kilayim in chutz la'aretz, they get malchus. So we'll say, remember again, kilayim. And I will say, by the way, I just want to point out, by Arla, that is how the Shulchan Aruch paskins, right? The halacha is, I will say, that Arla no hegis is in Shulchan Aruch Yardeya, Siman Reish Tzadik Dalet Sif Ches. Shulchan Aruch paskins, Arla no hegis b'chol makom b'kol zman. Arla applies all the time. In Eretz Yisrael, so again, so you go ahead, you buy a fruit tree, you plant it in your yard, that is subject to Arla. You can't eat the fruit of that tree for 3 years. That's the halacha. Arla applies in Chutz La'aretz and in Eretz Yisrael. B'shal Ovei Kochavim, B'shal Yisrael. So it's in the, okay, so Ella, Sheb'shal Eretz Yisrael min TORAH, U'b'chutz La'aretz halacha Moshe Sinai. So the Shulchan Aruch paskins, number one, Arla applies in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. That's number one. Number two, in Eretz Yisrael, it is a da'oraisa, and in Chutz La'aretz it is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Interesting. Rabbi say, listen to this. What about Safek Arla? So Safek Arla in Eretz Yisrael, the Shulchan Aruch paskins will be aser, and chutz la'aretz, it is mutter. It is mutter. So we pass on the way the Gemara just said over here. So how does that work? I don't understand. If Arla and Chutz La'aretz is a halacha l'Moshe Sinai, then why is Safek Arla mutter in Chutz La'aretz? And what's the answer? Because that's the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. In other words, the halacha l'Moshe Sinai says, yes, Arla applies in Chutz La'aretz when it's Vadai Arla. When it's Safek Arla, ultimately again, it is going to go ahead and be mutter. So as I say, he gives an example like this. He says, so he gives an example. Let's say I'm purchasing produce from someone, and I know they have a field in which there is arla. Which then means that what I'm purchasing from them is what? Safek arla. In Eretz Yisrael, you couldn't do that. In Chutz La'aretz, you could. In Chutz La'aretz you could. So halacha l'maisa arla applies in Eretz Yisrael Chutz La'aretz, and in Chutz La'aretz in Eretz Yisrael d'oraisa Chutz La'aretz halacha l'Moshe Sinai Safek arla Eretz Yisrael aser Chutz La'aretz mutter. Why mutter? Because that is the nature of the halacha l'Moshe Sinai. Incredible. Let's go back there. Rabbi Yochanan looking at the kilayim dvar Torah. We'll say kilayim, forbidden mixtures. You get malchus for it. It's asum d'oraisa. Amarle Rabbi Yossi, I say this about in Chutz La'aretz now. This is Kilayim Chutz La'aretz. So the Gemara says Amarle Rabbi Yossi. But we learned Tanan Kilayim Chutz. Hakilayim Divrei Sofrim. But we learned say that Kilayim are only Asr Midrabanan. Lo Kasha Kambel Klaya Kerem Kan Bar Kavas Ha'ilan. We will say interestingly enough, two different types of Kilayim. Kilaya Kerem, which Rabbi say means forbidden mixtures in a vineyard. Right? The paradigmatic example of that is planting wheat in a vineyard. That is only Asr Midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz. What's the type of Kilayim that is Asr Midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz? Grafting. That's Kilayim. So graft, literally, Harkavas Ilin is like grafting one tree with another. Any type of grafting is going to be Asr Midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz. But let's say again, Klai HaKerem, planting something foreign in a vineyard, that is going to be Asr Midrabanan. Incredible. So the Gemara says, Kiddush Shmuel, it's like Shmuel, the Amr Shmuel, Es Chuko Saiti Shmuel. When the pasuk says, listen to my statutes, Chukim Shechakakti Lecha Kivar. These refer to the halachos that I've already established. For example, Behem Techa Lo Sabia Kilayim. We'll say, don't crossbreed your animals. Sadcha Lo Sizra. Do not go ahead and seed your field with mixtures. Ma behem techa barba. Just like again by animals, we're talking about literally again grafting. Avsadcha baharba. So too in your field, we're talking about the prohibition of grafting. Ma behem techa noeg bein ba'aretz bein b'chutz la'aretz. Just like you can't crossbreed your animals, grafting your animals. Ultimately, again, in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz, Afsadcha noeg bein aretz bein Chutz La'aretz. So too, again, the prohibition on your field and grafting applies both in Eretz Yisrael and in Chutz La'aretz. So I will say, so a very interesting distinction over here. So on one hand, we have a statement that says that ultimately, again, Rabbi Yochanan says Kilayim is Asr Midaraisa. But we said Kilayim is only Asr Midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz. So what's going on? Two types of Kilayim. So let's say a typical Kilayim of Klaya Kerem, planting different species together, that's going to be Asr Midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz. Grafting is going to be Asr Midrabanan in Chutz La'aretz. Says the Gemara, Ve'ela haksiv sadcha, but it says sadcha your field. So this comes to exclude ultimately again the planting or the intermingling of different kinds of seeds in Chutz La'aretz, which ultimately again will be aser, but only midrabanan. Rav Chanan v'Rav Anan have shakli va'azli ba'arachav. So listen to this. Rav Chanan, Rav Anan, we're taking a trip together. They're walking together, and what happens? Chazinu lahu gavra tekazara ziraim bahadi hadadi. They saw a guy who was planting different seeds together. So what does that sound like? I will say, what is that? Kilayim. Literally, he's taking different seeds and planting them together. Amrale, so he said, so one said to the other, Nesi mar neshamte. We should go ahead and excommunicate him. He's planting kilayim, and it was this in Chutz La'aretz. He's planting kilayim in Chutz La'aretz. It's a public flaunting of halacha. We should excommunicate him. Amrale lo chavraihu. you don't have your halacha straight. So he said to me, you don't have your teachings clear. Right? So what he was saying to him is, you're incorrect about the halacha. We would not go ahead and punish someone for what we call sheleimah karim, or sheleimah of seeds in chutz la'aretz. Visu, chazula hagavra. They saw another guy, zara chiti usa'ari begufni. They saw a guy who was planting ultimately wheat and barley together with vines. Let's say that's was like sheleimah karim. Amrle nesi ma'nisham. They said, so one said to the other, let's excommunicate him. Amrle lo tsarisu. Do not do anything. Do not do anything. Right? Ultimately, again, you don't know the halachos of kilayim. Lo kaim alon Rabbi Yoshia da Amar ach yizra chita usor v'chatz ma'polis yad. After all, don't we hold like Rabbi Yoshia? Rabbi Yoshia says literally the prohibition of kilaya karen is only when you actively plant the barley seed, the wheat seed, and ultimately again the grape seed all together. That's kilaya karen. Okay. Rav Yosef Ma'ariv Bizrani Vizara. Rav Yosef used to go ahead and take different seeds and plant them together. Rashi points out this is not in a vineyard. It's not a vineyard. Right? You just take different seeds and plant them together. Amalei Abaye, Vanantanan, but we learned, ultimately again, V'amalei Abaye, Vanantanan, climbing to Vesofrim, that climber Asur D'Rabbanan. So how could he act on our say, even though it's quote unquote only Asur D'Rabbanan, you can't actively plant seeds together. Amalei Vo Kasha, Kan B'Klaya Karem, Kan B'Klaya Zuram. We'll say one is talking about forbidden mixtures in the vineyard. One is talking about mixing seeds. Klaya Karem, Te Ba'aretz Asurim Ba'na, B'chutz La'aretz Nami Gazu B'Rabbanan. So we'll say Klaya Karem, so forbidden mixtures in the vineyard, which in Eretz Yisrael are not only Asur to do, but also Asur Ba'na. Ultimately, again, Chutz La'aretz Nami Gazu B'Rabbanan. Chazal also said that it's Asur. Klay Zraim Te Ba'aretz Lo Asiri Ba'na, but Klay Zarim, forbidden mixtures of seeds, which in Eretz Yisrael are Asur to do, but not Asur Ba'na, B'chutz La'aretz Nami Lo Gazu B'Rabbanan. In Chutz La'aretz, Chazal said it's okay, you could do it. So we'll say it's very interesting here, making all of these distinctions within Kilayim. So we'll say, so remember again, just want to point out, everyone is agreeing for now that Kilayim only applies b'dirabbanan in Chutz La'aretz. So because of that, the parameters now are subject to dispute. So now in this latest iteration, what we're seeing over here is like this. The only type of Kilayim that are asur b'dirabbanan in Chutz La'aretz are Kilay HaKaren, planting forbidden mixtures in a vineyard. Right? Anything else in close proximity to vines. Why is that asur in Chutz La'aretz? Because since in Eretz Yisrael, if you do that, not only is it asur, but what it produces, right, the product is asur ba'na, so that will be asur in Chutz La'aretz. Other types of forbidden mixtures, like mixing seeds together, which in Eretz Yisrael is not asur ba'na, will be mutter in Chutz La'aretz. Very interesting. Hadam Rav Yosef, Lav Mil Sihi. So ultimately, again, that's what I said before, right? Strike it. Lav Mil Sihi, Amri Derav, Zora Ginsa, Debei Rav, Mishari Shari. So this is very interesting. Rav, when he planted his vegetable patch, right? He had a vegetable patch for his talmidim, right? He grew his own vegetables for his yeshiva. When he planted his vegetable patch, ultimately, again, he planted each vegetable in its own row. In its own row. Now let's analyze for just a moment, right? This would be a case of kilayim of seeds. What did we just say before when it comes to kilayim of seeds? Not klaya hakarem, just regular kilayim. What's the halacha of regular kilayim in Chutz La'aretz? What's the halacha? Mutter, right? You should be able to do it. The only time you can't do it is klaya hakarem. So now the Gemara says, strike that. It must not be asur. It must not be mutter. It must be asur. Why? Because Rav, when he planted his vegetable patch for his yeshiva, he planted each species of vegetable in its own row. Meaning what? He would not mix them together. The fact that he didn't mix them together indicates to us what? That even regular kilayim of seeds, is asur in Chutz La'aretz. My time, what's the reason? Lav mishum iruve kilayim. It must be that Rav is careful not to go ahead and plant different seeds together. Amalei Abaye says, Bishlama iyashma inon amadeis arba avaruchos haruga va'achas be'emsa shapir. Shabbos say, if Rav would have maximized the space in the field, separating each species, right, and enabling maximum planting in the field, I would have agreed with what you said. That's not what happened over here. Both say, in other words, if you're careful about kilayim, there's a way to plant your field with different species on each border, maximizing the middle area. That's not what Rav did. Instead, Rav just planted. What did he do? It was a row of cucumbers and a row of tomatoes and a row of this. So why did he do that? Well, say either he did it because of the aesthetic value, it looked nice, but Rashi really accepts the second approach. This has nothing to do with kilayim. We'll say, what does it have to do with? What does it have to do with? It has to do with making things easier for the guy who's harvesting the vegetables. Rav had no problem planting everything in a big jumble, in a big mix. Why? Because Rav holds, like we just said before, namely, that the only type of kilayim that applies in Chutz La'aretz is what? Is what? Ultimately, klaya keren. But mixing together other seeds is totally fine. Totally fine. So why did Rav plant each vegetable species independently? Why? To make it easier for the farmer. Right? So when the farmer comes, the gardener comes to collect the produce, if everything's jumbled together, what's going to happen? His job is going to take 10 times as long. Where are the cucumbers? Where's this? Where's that? Instead, what did Rav do? He said, plant each species in its own row. Nothing to do with kilayim. Everything to do with making things easier for the gardener. So we'll say, so again, we saw the halacha by Arla. Again, we're going to come back. I want to come back maybe tomorrow, or when we have a little bit more time, to the halachos concerning kilayim. But it sounds like what the Gemara's conclusion on kilayim is, Rabbi say, is that kilayim in Chutz La'aretz is going to be mutter. Kilayim in Chutz La'aretz is going to be mutter. Ultimately, again, I should say it differently. Kilayim in Chutz La'aretz is going to be asr midrabanan. Strike that previous statement. Asr midrabanan. But when is it asr midrabanan? We'll say what type of kilayim? Kilay hakerem is going to be asr midrabanan. Other types of kilayim, just mixing together other types of seeds, sounds like in Chutz La'aretz is going to be mutter. But again, we'll come back to the halacha l'maisa, but that seems to be the conclusion of the Gemara right now. Let's just go a little bit weiter just because of time. Mishnah. Kala ose mitzvah achos mativim lo u'ma'arichin lo yamav. We'll say whoever does one mitzvah, such a beautiful Mishnah. Beautiful Mishnah. Whoever does one mitzvah, mativin lo, HaKadosh Baruch Hu does good for him in this world. U'ma'arichin lo yamav, v'nochel es ha'aretz. And ultimately, again, Hashem gives him longevity, and he inherits the world. That refers to Olam Haba. So the Mishnah is telling me that a person does a mitzvah, I was saying, there's reward in this world and reward in the world to come. If you don't do a mitzvah, you don't get the bracha in this world. You don't receive longevity. And you don't get olam haba. So we'll say, so again, a pretty straightforward Mishnah, incredibly profound, incredibly beautiful. Just want to point out, the Mishnah is not saying God didn't commit Naveira. He's just saying, in life, failure to take advantage of your opportunities prevents you from reaping the benefit. That's all. Just cause and effect. You do the mitzvah, you get reward in this world and reward in the world to come. You don't get the mitzvah, you don't do the mitzvah, ultimately again, you don't get the reward in this world. It's just interesting to note that the Mishnah breaks up the reward into three parts, right? There's ultimately again, mativin lo, he benefits in this world, marichin lo yamav, longevity, and then nochel es ha'aretz, inherits the land, olam haba. Olam haba. But we've said many different times that ultimately, again, and we're going to discuss this in the Gemara, longevity doesn't have to mean actual, longevity. Longevity could also mean enhances your quality of life. Ma'arichin lo yamav, literally, again, prolongs your days, means your days are filled with greater meaning when a person lives a life of avodas Hashem. The lifespan itself, that's up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. But arichos yamim, literally again, because we'll say, it doesn't say arichos shanim. If we're talking about longevity should be expressed as arichos shanim, prolonging of years. What do you mean arichos yamim, prolonging of days? Prolonging of days means a reference to quality of life. Your day is longer. Your day is better. The quality of your life is dramatically enhanced when one lives a life of profound spirituality. So let's go back there. So the question really, is this true? I will say, this Mishnah is theologically problematic. Why? Not problematic, but theologically intriguing, because the Mishnah is clearly telling me that when you do a mitzvah, a lot of reward. A lot of reward everywhere. Reward in this world, reward in the world to come. Where it says, whoa, hold up, or minhu. The Mishnah tells us that ultimately, again, These are the things that a person benefits from them in this world. But the principle of the mitzvah is waiting for him in the world to come. In other words, the following is a list of mitzvos for which you get reward in this world and the next. And what are those mitzvos? Kibud avayim, honoring your parents. Gemilos chasadim, acts of charitable kindness. Hachnasas archim, hospitality. Havas shalom min adam lechavero, being a peacemaker between people, right? Creating shalom between people. The TALMUD TORAH kineged kulam, and learning, the schar for learning, ultimately again is greater than everything before it. Now, I will say, what do you clearly see from this Mishnah? Or from this price? What do you see from here? These are the mitzvos for which you get reward in this world and the next. Which by definition tells me what? That for everything else I don't. Or for everything else I will say again, I get reward in the world to come, not in this world. It contradicts the Mishnah. Why does it contradict the Mishnah? The Mishnah makes it sound like I will say, which mitzvos do you get reward for in this world and the next? Everything. So what's going on up here? I'm Rabbi Yehuda Haki Amar. So this is what it means. Or Rabbi Yehuda said, this is what it means to say. Haki Kamar. Kala ose mitzvah achas yisera al zechu Yosef mativin lo v'dome kemish mekayim kala Torah kula. Shabbos said, this is incredible. What's the goal in life? He'll say, so there are many goals in life, but let's start out first with a relatively modest spiritual goal. The goal is to have more mitzvos than averos. That's the goal. In fact, the Rabbi Hilchos Tshuva says, what's the definition of a tzaddik? Someone who has more mitzvos than averos. What's the definition of a rasha? Someone who has more averos than mitzvos. A benoni, someone who has equal amounts. Rabbi Hilchos Tshuva. So the goal in life, the first basic metric of spiritual success is I want more mitzvos than averos. Now watch this. What is the Brayso coming to teach us? We'll say, take a look at Rashi. Sorry, not yet. So the goal over here is kala osim intzachas yisaz v'yos mativano v'domakim shikim kala Torah kula michlal tahanach afilu bechad nami Rav Shmuel Silber shimhaisa shekula machras. I will say what this price means to say is like this. In general, in order to have more mitzvos than averos, you have to actually go ahead and do more mitzvos than averos. What the price that we just mentioned, coming to will say is, if you have one of these mitzvos, right, the mitzvos that in the list that we just mentioned above, even if you have equal mitzvos and averos, if amongst your mitzvos is one in that list, that tips the scale in your favor. These mitzvos are so powerful, the ones listed in the price above, they're so powerful that even if you're a benoni, right, and you have equal scales, but you have one of these mitzvos in your spiritual inventory, they will tip the scales in your favor. Incredible. Look at Rashi. Lomer shem haisa shkula machras hadikani elu dvarim b'mechza abonos u'mechza zechuyos kamar. We'll say, when the Brayso said before that these are the things that a person gets benefit from in this world and the next, it's talking about someone who is a benoni. His scales are exactly equal. Right? V'ka'amar, and what happens? V'ka'amar v'yishmemechza zechuyos achas me'elu, and if amongst your mitzvah inventory, you have one of these aforementioned mitzvos, the power of these mitzvos are, they tilt the scales in your favor. So in other words, Rabbi say, if I'm a benoni, and the scales are equal, what do I need to tilt my scales? What do I need? An additional mitzvah. Or again, like the Rambam says again, this time of year you need tshuva. You need tshuva to tilt the scales. Right? What the Brayso is telling us is, if in your spiritual inventory you have one of these mitzvos are so powerful, they tilt the scales automatically in your favor, even without the performance of an additional mitzvah. So again, if you're a benoni and you don't have one of these mitzvos in your inventory, you need to actively do something to tilt the scales in your favor. If you're a benoni and you have one of these mitzvos in your inventory, that mitzvah actively tilts the scales in your favor without doing something additional. Pretty incredible. So I'll say, is that true? That ultimately, again, if you do an extra mitzvah, so now you have one additional mitzvah in your inventory, right? That ultimately mativen lo. And I will say, mativen lo always makes it sound like you're getting reward in this world. So I'll say, I'll raise a kasha. We'll say any person. So we'll say now we're going to delve deep into the theological area, ultimately again of schar, of mitzvos in this world. So the Gemara says, We'll say, get ready for this. If you have a person who has more mitzvos than averos, so what do we do to such an individual? Mariyamo. HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishes him. And we'll say, this is a guy who has more mitzvos than averos. Why is HaKadosh Baruch Hu punishing him? Why is he punishing him? He's punishing him in order to help rid him of all of the baggage of his averos, so that he is able to reap the benefit of his mitzvos in the world. We'll say, no, we'll have to stop over here. I'm leaving you a little bit on a theological cliffhanger. We'll pick up over here with this in yahrzeit Hashem tomorrow. All right, so it looks like we are descending back into the... All right, fine. We're doing so well. All right, we'll figure it out tomorrow. We'll stop over here for today. Absolutely incredible. Pick up with this tomorrow and Hashem tomorrow. Say that again.